Good morning. Nice to see you guys. I mean, we could do that too. It'd be fun. You know, today as we begin our time together, here's what I want to talk about. I'll tell you right out of the gate. It's this: sometimes we live for someday. And when I say someday, not Sunday, but someday. Sometimes we live for someday in a way that makes us struggle with right now. That's what we're going to talk about as we spend our time here together today. You know, my wife and I, we started dating, and I think we dated for about a year and a half before we got engaged. I remember it was so fun. That's what I remember about it. It was fun. I just wanted to spend all my time with her. I thought she was fantastic. She quickly became my favorite person. I loved talking with her. I loved hearing about what she thought about and how she saw the world and sharing new experiences. It's still true. All of those things are still true. I just remember when I was learning all of this for the first time and experiencing these moments, and it was really great. She lived in San Diego at the time for a lot of that period of time in relationship. We were long distance because she was going to a school called Point Loma that's out there. And I was still here in Tucson, back where both of our families were from. But we saw each other all the time because it's not that long of it's a pretty quick plane flight. And a lot of times you could pick up a cheap flight at that point in time, or it's a pretty quick drive. Wasn't that bad. And so we just kind of made our way back and forth, ended up seeing each other all of the time. And then I had this moment where I was like, I think I want to marry this woman. And so I asked her to marry me. And she said yes. And it was over a Christmas break while she was home. And I was so excited. And then 2 weeks later, she went back to San Diego. We're going to go back into long distance just like we've always done, except this time I was starting school in Chicago. And so I moved all the way to Chicago. And you know, there's a difference between having half the United States in between you and not having half the United States in between you and the amount of time you see each other. And I, at the time, neither one of us owned cell phones. So the only phones we had were the landlines attached to the wall in our dorm rooms. And so you didn't always know if you were going to be there or not. And we bought these little things called phone cards for long distance. And you bought like a certain amount of time that you could use and all that stuff. And so we knew we couldn't talk to each other all the time. So we set a date every Sunday night. I'd be in my dorm, she'd be in her dorm, and we'd call each other and we'd have like a phone date night to just catch up throughout the week. This is what we did every single Sunday. And it was like sacred. You didn't mess with it. You know what I mean? I looked forward to it. This is just the way that it went. But here's what would happen, you guys. I'm now in Chicago. We're doing long distance just like we always did. It'd always been fun and easy and good and all of these different things. And it changed. Because what would happen, she would call and she'd have a moment during her week where she'd care about something or she'd experiencing something or she wanted me to know something. And so she'd call. And I wasn't standing in my room next to my phone to answer that particular thing. And so I'd miss the call. And then I'd get back and I'd check the message and she'd be like, hey, wish you could talk to me. And then I'd call her back, but now she's out with friends or something and we'd miss each other constantly. Or I would do the same thing where I'm like, man, there's something I really want to talk to her about. And I'd call her and she's just not there. She's out with friends or studying or working or doing all the things she was doing at that point in time. And she's just not there. And all of a sudden, Sunday nights, that phone call on Sunday nights stopped being like, hey, there's this amazing time where we just get to connect each week. And it became, here's the time where we voice all of our frustrations of where the other person wasn't there and why they didn't answer and why we haven't been to connect throughout the week. I don't know if any of you have ever done long distance. This is what makes it hard, right? And I started to just get frustrated. I was like, what changed? Like, when did this go from fun to frustrating, right? When did this go from easy to irritating? Like, when did this change? Because it all felt so simple and so easy before. What happened? And here's what I realized. The moment that we got engaged, our perspective shifted pretty dramatically. See, before that, we were hanging out and we were always in the here and the now. We didn't know what the future was. We were just in the here and the now and trying to enjoy one another, trying to figure out, is this the person I want to spend my life with? Is this someone that I enjoy and how's this going? And we were always here and now. But the moment we got engaged, we had a future someday. And it was a time when we were going to be together, when we lived together, we're going to build a life together, when problems aren't shared over the telephone or over missed calls, but you're actually working through these moments and these things together. We knew from the moment I got engaged that there was a someday and what someday would look like. And now what would happen is when she called me during the week, and I didn't answer. She's calling with someday in mind because he's supposed to be there, because we're supposed to connect, because we're supposed to build a life, because we're supposed to do all these things, because that's what someday is going to look like. Where is he? And it made right now really hard. And when I would call her, I would look and be like, and she's supposed to be my person, and she's supposed to be this, and she's supposed to be that, but she's out with them or this moment or whatever. And it's because I've got someday in mind, but I'm living in right now. And there's something about the way I was holding on to someday and the way I was living in someday that made me struggle in right now. This is just part of what makes relationships, especially long distance ones, sometimes a little bit difficult. But I share this not just because I thought you should hear about what engaged life was like when I was frustrated. Right? I share this because I actually think this happens in my life, and I bet this happens in your life more than we like to think about, or more than we're always aware of. Where we find ourselves with an image of a someday that we might believe God has for us, we might believe that we want to get to, and we hold on to that. Man, what a beautiful picture, and yet we're stuck living in right now, and it starts to make us struggle here and now because of the way we're holding on to that thing. And don't get me wrong, I love someday. I think someday is beautiful. I don't want you to lose it. But there's a struggle with this. Think of it this way. Maybe some of you in this room are single, and you don't want to be. Maybe you're single, and the reality is what you really want is not to be single, and what you really want is to actually be connected with somebody and to share life with somebody. You want a person that you share your life with. And so you know what that can look like. You see that around you. You know what someday can be, and you hold it like a dream in your head. You might even believe, I think that's what God has for me. And because it's beautiful, and because you hold it, not what you're in right now, and you're going through dating apps or people or awkward moments or things you don't want to be a part of or different things, and you're so frustrated with this because this isn't that, and if you could just skip all of this to get to that, man, that would be better, but that's not where you live. You live here. You live now. This happens to almost everyone I've ever met who has kids, right? Because one day, someday, I won't have to change another diaper. Someday, I won't have to have a car seat in my car. Someday, I'll be able to go out and leave my kids home alone because they'll be a little more self-sustainable and manage that process, and I'll get to have some time back. Someday, my kids, who are now adults, will finally get out of my house and have a house of their own. Someday, and I just feel like I always hear parents at every age, every stage, living for a someday, staring at right now, and it makes it frustrating sometimes. And it can make you struggle a little bit, and it can get hard. Sometimes it's relationships. Some of us are in a marriage or a relationship where we're struggling right now. And you find yourself in a place where there's contention. Or you dream of a someday where you've learned forgiveness. And you dream of a someday where this tension in this moment and the thing you're walking through is actually behind you, where you can just be connected and things can feel a little more simple again as you understand them to be. And that someday's there, and you even believe God has that for you, and you know that that can be there, and it's why it's so frustrating when right now explodes. That's why it's so frustrating when in the midst of right now, suddenly everything just gets really difficult because you don't live in someday yet. You're here right now, and it's hard. Maybe it's the job you work. I hear this all the time too, where people are like, man, when I just get that job, when I just have that position, right? When I just have this, and you're like, well, do you like the job you have? It's fine, it's good. I don't not like it, but that's what I want. That's what I'm really after. Or maybe it's when I have that team, or when I no longer have that boss and I have this, or whatever it is. And consequently, you know what someday could look like, and you're staring at it and you think it's there for you, but you're not living in someday, you're living right now, and it makes you in a job that maybe you would have liked, but you don't, and you're frustrated and you're tense and you just want to, it's like you're doing your time. I have a friend that can tell me how many days it is till they retire, always. And they're not super close yet, but they know. Because they've got a someday in their head that they're working towards, and every day is just another day, another moment, another day, another moment, till I get to that someday. And it starts to rob right now a little bit. It's easy for that to happen. And then some of us are facing really difficult things. Some of us are battling illness, or autoimmunity, or cancer, or mental health issues, or disease. And you know what a healthy body or a healthy mind can be like. And you've got this image in your head and in your life of, this is where I want to get to, and this is what I'm fighting to get to. This is what I want to be. And then sometimes you're in the right here and the right now, and you're going through a treatment, or you're going through a moment, or you're struggling through the next thing, and it's hard. And you're not there, and because you know what there looks like, it just makes this frustrating sometimes to you. And it's hard, because sometimes, friends, we can find ourselves holding on to someday in a way that makes us actually struggle right now. This is normal, and this is human, and this can look different for all of us. Do you want to know what the hard part about that is? We don't live our lives in someday, do we? Where's your life lived? Right here and right now. This is where your real life is actually happening, right here and right now. Someday is a beautiful thing that holds hope and goodness and beauty. Don't ever let go of what those pieces are. But the reality is your real life isn't lived someday. Your real life, you get to someday by living right now. In fact, that's maybe a difficult truth, but it is. It's the only way to get to the someday that God has for you is by walking with God right here and right now. And it's step after step, moment after moment that ends you up, that gets you to that space where you're finally like, I think I made it to someday. I think I'm standing in someday. In fact, my someday's right now. But that's the path, and it's true for all of us. So I want to talk about this. This morning, I want to talk about this tension of when this happens in our life, what it does. We're going to look at a moment with Moses and the Israelites where you see the same dynamic happening with the people. And I want to unpack for a while, just kind of here's the progression of what happens in our hearts and in our lives when we live in that someday in a way that hurts us right now. And then what I want to do is in the story, because I think God does some amazing things in the story, I want to point to two things that I think we can do right now, that we can actually step into in our real lives, in our right now, so that we can be the kind of people who live in the someday that God might have for us. And if you're going, what is that someday? I'm gonna ask you to think about that. I don't know what someday will look like for your life. I am not God, right? I don't know what the beautiful thing that he holds for you. I don't know what the dream that he's put in your heart. I don't know what the moment that you're walking through in your life right now, but I believe you do. I believe you know what that is. And so if that comes to mind at any point throughout this and you're holding that, just hold on to it. And this will be a more prevalent or relevant illustration for you. So this is what we're going to journey through. If you have your Bibles, you can turn, and we're going to go briefly to Exodus chapter 3, and then we're going to spend the rest of the morning in Numbers chapter 11, where we're going to work through a whole passage in there. So Exodus chapter 3, we're going to see this. Exodus 3 begins at a time when the Hebrew people are the Egyptian slave labor workforce of Egypt. And they've been there a very long time. In fact, they're Hebrew people, but they would have looked like and felt like Egyptians in the way that they'd lived there long enough that that culture was probably their culture. They lived there long enough that the gods of the Egyptians were probably their gods. And the way you approached them and thought about them and worshiped them was probably the same way. They'd been in Egypt long enough that they had a lot of Egypt inside of them, if that makes any sense. Do you know what I mean? To become a part of who they were. And God goes to a man named Moses, and he says, Moses, I want these to be my people. I want to be their God, and I want to take them somewhere special. I want to take them to a promised land. And this is what we read about in Exodus chapter 3, verse 8. Moses is supposed to lead them. So God goes and he says, beginning of verse 8, I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of that land to a good and broad land, to a different place. I want to take them from this to that, from where they are to a desired future that I want to take them to. And he says it's a broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey. This is really significant in this story because this becomes the first moment that Moses gets to hear this, who then tells the Israelites who gets to hear this. And for the first time, the Israelite people they're not just the slave labor workforce of Egypt who just stare into their futures and it's forever. All of a sudden, they have a picture of someday that they want to get to. They have a picture of someday in their hearts of a promised land where they get to be a people unto themselves, where they'll be free and liberated and God will be with them and they'll be with him and this promised land, this beautiful future. And it becomes a compelling picture for their hearts. You're in Egypt now, but someday I'm going to take you there. Okay, now jump in your Bibles to Numbers chapter 11. It's 2 books later. Numbers 11. By the time we get to Numbers 11, if you've seen the movie The Prince of Egypt, or I don't know, the Ten Commandments, or whatever you saw, you read the story, you're familiar with it, a lot has happened at this point in time. So the Israelites, Moses has led them out of Egypt. They have escaped Pharaoh. They've escaped the pursuing army. They've walked through the sea. The waters parted. They've seen God do absolutely amazing things and lead them forward. And when we get to Numbers chapter 11, they have journeyed all the way through the desert to this place, this mountain called Mount Sinai, and they've gathered around it. And God's used that time and that moment to unite them as a people. And they've gotten laws and systems and ways to relate to God and all of this stuff so that they can really be an anchored people as they move through their life, as they continue on their journey. And then they leave Mount Sinai and they look out into the desert towards wherever it is that the promised land's going to be, and they start going because they're not there yet. They're between where they just were and the beautiful place that they really want to go, and they step out into that journey into the midst of the desert. This is where we find ourselves in Numbers chapter 11. And let me just say this. They've been journeying for about 2 years now. So for those of us who have issues with patience like myself, right, that might help us out a little bit just for context to be like, they've been in this for a minute. This is not like a new moment. This wasn't just like, it's been a rough week, you guys. Like they've been journeying through this. Start at verse 1. It says, and the people complained in the hearing of the Lord about their misfortunes. And when the Lord heard it, his anger was kindled. And the fire of the Lord burned among them and consumed some outlying parts of the camp. And the people see this, right? And so they're scared and they go to their leader, Moses, do something. The people cried out to Moses, and Moses prayed to the Lord, and the fire died down. So verse 1, this opening passage of chapter 11, it starts with people complaining about their situation that they find themselves in. They're frustrated, they're complaining about it. And do you know why they're complaining? Well, they're complaining because they're not in Egypt. They were in Egypt. They look back at their life and they're like, back there, we think of Egypt as a desert. We forget that the Nile River flows through there, that it was an established agricultural base, economic base. It was a place of security. And so they're looking back there and they're like, man, we had a lot of things going out there. And then they're like, and there's this beautiful picture of the future we're supposed to be going towards, but do you see it? I don't see it. I don't even know where it is. I'm holding it in my heart. I'm holding it like a dream for myself, but I don't even know how to get there because what I'm looking at right now is sand. What I'm looking at right now is the desert. What I'm looking at right now is a place that, sure, it's producing some vegetation and some things, but man, how do you live here? It's probably like when your family from anywhere other than Arizona comes here to visit you and they're like, you like this place, right? It's not very green. They don't understand the desert. I love it. I grew up here. This place kind of has my heart, but not everybody always understands that, right? They're complaining because they're in that space between where they just left and where they want to get to. And there's this future that they have a desire for, and it's not here fast enough. It's not here yet because they're in the desert. Think of the desert like a metaphor, right? Because deserts are difficult when we find ourselves in that space in life. The desert is the place you find yourself in when you're not where you want to be yet. And you're journeying through it and it's hard. Deserts are the place where sometimes things feel dried up. Deserts are the place where sometimes you feel fatigued and tired. Deserts are often the place where it feels like difficulty is happening and you're facing adversity and it's tough. You know, they were walking through a desert. And I wonder for you, maybe you relate to this, maybe you don't, that's okay. But if you do relate to this, what's the desert that you're walking through in your life right now as you move towards the beautiful thing that you hope God has for you, the beautiful thing that you think God has for you? What's that look like for you right now? Hold that picture in your head as we talk through this story, because what you're gonna see is this isn't just their story. There's something in here for us too. You know, in the story that the people are walking through, they journey through that desert, very literal desert, and so they start to grumble. They start to get frustrated and they start to complain. And so God shows a demonstration of his power. He shows up with like flames around the camp, right? And so they see this. And you know, when I read this, the thing that I think on this is, man, if I'm really struggling with like, where are we going and what's gonna happen and why is this not happening yet? And I'm frustrated. And then I see this demonstration. I think it's supposed to speak to me to say, man, God is bigger than the adversity I face. He's bigger than the desert that I'm in. He's more powerful than that which stands in front of me. But this whole picture, this whole illustration is lost on the people. They're just like, make it stop, Moses. And so he does. And then we keep reading verse 4. It says this, now the rabble, if you're confused on that word, we'll come back to it. Now the rabble that was among them had a strong craving. And the people of Israel also wept again, and they said, oh, that we had meat to eat. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt that cost nothing, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, the garlic. I feel like that verse could just keep going. Can you imagine a group of people in the desert just being like, and this vegetable, and that vegetable, and this thing, and they're literally just imagining everything they don't have right now, you know? It's like a little kid's Christmas list. It's amazing. All of these things. You see, something's beginning to happen among the people. As they journey towards that someday that God ultimately has for them, this happens to us too. It doesn't come fast enough. And the desert's longer than they thought it would be. And the moment's harder than they thought it would be. And this just feels like they're starting to lose sight of where they are and lose sight of what's actually happening in the here and in the now, and they're starting to struggle. So they band together and they do what many of us do when we're in a desert for too long, is we start to complain. Like we start to grumble with one another because it's so easy to do. Complaining is like glitter. It's really shiny. You look at it and you're like, I don't know, it doesn't seem that bad. That seems like it'd actually be cathartic and kind of good. And so I'll get in there, and then the next thing you know, you're like, it's all over my hands. It's all over my shirt. It's all over my life. I found it 3 years later, right? Glitter's just everywhere. By the way, if you ever want to make me really frustrated, send me a card with glitter all over it. It's like a rule in my house, right? Because it just spreads to everything. Complaining really is, it's contagious. We don't think about it this way, but it is. In fact, you know the fastest way to bond with somebody? The fastest way to create a connection? It's not by going like, man, here's my deepest passions and joys right now. That's not the fastest way. In fact, if I said that to you, you'd be like, cool, man, thanks, that's really good for you, I'm glad. But if I come to you and I complain, we're gonna bond. But here's a good illustration. If this week, or right now, if I went and I just said, hey, man, I love the Arizona sunshine and I just love that we get to live life in this place, you'd be like, yeah, me too, that's awesome. If I said, I thought it was finally gonna cool down around here, but did you see that Tuesday it's supposed to be almost a high of 90 and we're back? We're gonna have a great conversation, I know it. We're gonna bond over that, and then we'll probably start talking about some social issue or some other frustration or what's not working in life, and then the next thing you know, people will be around us and we'll be sharing and all of that. The fastest way to bond is actually by complaining with one another. And you see this, we do this all the time. Why do you think social media is amazing? Yeah, right? That's what we do. It's the fastest way. Complaining is contagious and we love it. But at this point in the story, the people are beginning to complain, and it doesn't just start with complaint. See, what happens is when we find ourselves reaching for someday, hoping for someday in a way that's making us struggle right now, we lose sight of what's actually going on right now, of what God's actually doing right now. And we start to just look at everything that right now isn't because it's not someday. And then we turn that into complaint. And then complaint becomes contagious. And then once we start complaining with one another, we build bonds out of those pieces, and then it creates a spirit of discontentment with us and the people around us. And next thing you know, we're a people identifying in a way that we never really wanted to be. Who wants to be known for everything that they hate about this world and about this life? And yet this is what we become. And by this point, a whole group of people have begun bonding over dissatisfaction and complaining together. Verse 4 in my ESV translation calls them the rabble. And it's a people without an anchor. The Hebrew would be like, this is a vagabond group of people. It's a wayward people who are this is a group of people without an anchor because they've started complaining. They bonded over this negativity. They've been in the desert for too long. They're tired of sand. They're so frustrated. And then it says that they had a strong craving. The word that's used there for craving in the Hebrew is actually the word for like a deep kind of lust. They lusted greatly after something. They were jealous of something that wasn't in their life. And they all say, if we just had meat. Because when you're in the desert and when you're looking at someday that's not happening yet and you're fatigued and tired here, you just want whatever is not here because you think that's the answer to help you feel like you're there. You just want that thing. It's how this thing goes. And that's why the verse reads the way it does. We don't have meat. And we don't have leeks or onions or garlic or cucumbers or all of the things. Like we don't have anything. And the list just keeps growing. See, the longer it gets, the more you live in that spirit of complaint, the more it becomes a spirit of discontentment in you and around you, the longer the list of what's not in your life will grow, the harder it becomes to live in the here and the now. Numbers 11, continuing on at verse 6. The people say, right, we just wish we had some meat. And they go, but now our strength is dried up. Because we don't have meat, we're tired. Our strength is dried up. And there's nothing at all but this manna to look at. Now, if you're new to this idea about manna is a Hebrew word that just means, what is it? Isn't that funny? And it's because every day God would cause this manna to cover the ground and the people would look and be like, what is it? And they're like, okay, that's what we'll call it. And that's literally the name of the food. It'd be all over the ground. Verse 7 tells us what it is. It says, now the manna was like coriander seed. So coriander is really small, right? Think of it like a BB in your hand, and its appearance like that of bdellium. So now think of like a BB in your finger that looks a little bit like dried up sap or something. And the people went about and they gathered it and they ground it in hand mills, or they beat it in mortars and boiled it in pots, and they made cakes of it. And the taste of it was like the taste of cakes baked with oil. When I read that the first time, I was like, oh, that doesn't sound too bad. Right, that sounds fine. Verse 9, when the dew fell upon the camp in the night, the manna would fall with it. See, guys, the people weren't starving. They actually had food. They just hated the food they had because it was every day, every meal. We'd all get a little worn out by that. But they actually have what it is they need. They actually have the sustenance that they need at that moment. God would cause this stuff like manna to cover the ground. They'd grind it up and make cakes or breads out of it, or they'd make it into porridge or something. But the people had manna, they had bread, they had food. They weren't starving. But when you're trying to get to someday while you're living in the desert of right now, you miss the manna that's on the ground in your life. You don't see the thing that's on the ground in your life because it's not what ought to be someday. It's not what someday holds, and you just start to get frustrated. It's harder and harder to live right now. You know, I cook food a lot because I like to cook. One of the things that I'll do is on occasion, I'll recognize, man, we got a really busy week, so I'll just batch cook a bunch of stuff. Do you know what I mean? I don't know how many of you guys do stuff like this, but I'll be like, this way I'll cook 3 big meals on the weekend that are gonna last us throughout the week. If you guys want anything else, feel free to jump in, do the pieces, but like this will hold us together as we go. You know, this is good. So I did that one week. And I made 3 huge meals. And when I say a huge meal, that could feed like 30 because my family's Midwestern, and so it's just how that happens. And so I have all of this food in the fridge and all these things that are there. And my daughter midweek walks up to the fridge and she opens, because it's one of those ones with like the 2 doors, you know, opens the doors and she's standing in front of the fridge and she just goes, ugh. And I just look over at her and she's like, I'm looking in the fridge and there's no food to eat and I am so hungry. And I'm like, that fridge is full. Right? Like I'm looking at it going, that fridge is full. And so I think we're having a rational discussion and that's what I should engage in and that's what I should do. So I just go, actually, I made 3 things. You can eat any of those. There's actually 7 options that you could choose in there right now. Let me list them. Here are the 7 different things. Feel free to help yourself to any of those. And then I realized that's not the point. It's not even what she wanted to hear. You already knew that. I miss the beat sometimes on these things. And she looks at me and she goes, I don't want any of that food. I don't like any of that food. And then she says to me what kids have been saying to their parents from as long as anybody can remember. And it's, why can't we have normal food like my friends do at their houses? Why do we only have, I don't want your food. I want food I like. And then I say to that what parents have been saying to kids forever. And I just look and I go, well, when you buy your own food, you're welcome to fill your own fridge with whatever food you make and want to do with that. So feel free to enjoy the 7 options, or maybe you're not really hungry. And I think, wow, that was great. This is going to work. We're going to unite. This is going to work out, right? And then she just looks at me and she goes, good, I want to buy my own food and have my own fridge someday. And then she walks off and the whole thing's wasted. And I just do it again. I'll do it next week too. And then I'll tell you, like, this is how this happens, right? Because sometimes it's not about the manna on the ground. Sometimes it's not about the food that's actually provided, the thing that's actually in the refrigerator in front of you, because it's not the future that you ultimately want to live in. And when you hold on to that future, the thing that you're staring at right now, it's just not enough. Even if it is enough, it's not enough for you. And you just don't see it. She can be standing in front of the fridge and I'm like, it's right there, it's right there, it's right there. And to her, the shelves are empty. Isn't that fascinating? And we go, oh, kids, but that's how we see our lives a lot, you guys. That's what starts to happen when we're living in the future in a way that hurts us, makes us struggle with the right now. You see how these things play out? It's difficult, but it's normal, isn't it? It's like most or all of us at some point in time. It's just a question where we're at in life. So I wanted to walk out that progression, but I also wanted to point to 2 things that we can do right now, because your life is lived in the here and the now. So I want to talk about 2 things that we can do right now that help us embrace life so that we can be the kind of people that step into whatever the someday is that God ultimately has for any one of us. And that's what I'll spend the rest of my time doing. So here's the first one. Here's my challenge to each of you guys. It's to invite people to partner with you in the here and now. And I mean this, to invite people to partner with you in the here and now. And if you're looking at me, you're going, that's it? It's not a small thing. It's a really big thing. And here's why. The desert can be a really hard place to live. The desert can be a really tough place to live. And do you know it's even harder when you're living there alone? It's really hard to go through deserts when you're by yourself. Look at Moses, verse 10. Moses heard the people weeping throughout their clans. And it doesn't mean that everyone's just crying everywhere he looks. Like everyone's complaining and whining. And you're going to see him use that metaphor as we keep going. Moses heard the people weeping throughout their clans, everyone at the door of his tent. So they're coming to Moses going, fix this, solve this. And he's like, I don't know what to do. And the anger of the Lord blazed hotly. So the people are upset. God's frustrated. And Moses loses his mind. Moses was displeased. Verse 11, Moses said to the Lord, why have you dealt ill with your servant? Why have I not found favor in your sight that you lay the burden of all this people on me? Did I conceive all these people? Did I give them birth that you should say to me, carry them in your bosom as a nurse carries a nursing child to the land that you swore to give their fathers? This is Moses going, these people are acting like babies. That's what he's saying. And he goes, and I don't know how to carry them, and I don't know what to do, and I'm responsible for like 1,000,000 people that I didn't birth. And this is a lot, God. I am frustrated. Verse 13. They're asking for meat. Where am I to give meat to all these people? For they weep before me and they say, give us meat that we may eat. And he says, I'm not able to carry all the people alone. I think this is the first vulnerable, honest moment that Moses has in this real conversation, where he actually says something profound and true about his heart. Verse 14, I am not able to carry all these people alone. This burden is too heavy for me. Moses brings this to God. Then verse 15, he says, well, if you're going to treat me like this, can you just kill me now? He does. If I have found favor in your sight, if you value me at all, that I may not see my wretchedness. God, I don't want to be the guy who keeps walking this path out and ends where I think I'm going right now. If that's my ultimate destination, can we just end this early, is what he says to God. Moses is a little bit frustrated. He's a little bit dramatic. The people are frustrated. God is frustrated. Moses loses it. God, I can't do this. God, I don't know what to do. God, this burden is too heavy for me to carry. You know, the truth is when you've been walking through the desert long enough and you realize it's not just a patch of sand, it's a real desert. And you started working that out in your life and you're trying to trust God and you're trying to take what you need from it and you're trying to grow and you're trying to get and be the person that you need to be. At some point, it just starts to get really fatiguing and it gets really heavy. And then when you add other people into the mix, because we're all a little complicated, it can get really tough, can't it? And the burden that you start to carry with you, sometimes it just starts to feel like this has gotten really heavy and this is really hard for me to carry alone. And you know the good news of that, friends, is that you don't have to. You don't actually have to carry that same weight alone. Look what God says to Moses. Then the Lord said to Moses, gather for me 70 men of the elders of Israel. When I first started reading this, you know what my expectation was? Moses, go find Aaron, who's like his guy in the story. You know what I mean? Like his friend. Go find Aaron, but that's not what he says. He goes, go find 70 people. Sometimes it's one person, sometimes you need a group of people around you, right? Go find 70 men of the elders of Israel, whom you know to be the elders of the people and officers over them, and bring them to the tent of meeting. And then I love what God says to Moses right here. And let them stand there with you. Moses, you're going to be standing there, and they're going to be standing there, shoulder to shoulder with you. And God says, and I will come down and talk with you there, and I will take some of the spirit that is on you, some of what I put in you about the care for these people and the places we're going, the things I want to take, and I'll take some of that spirit and I'll put it on them so that they'll have your heart and they'll have your cares and they'll care about this like you care about this, Moses. You're going to know you're not alone. And they shall bear the burden of the people with you so that you may not bear it yourself alone. You know what I love about this moment? Do you know you can be honest with God? I think a lot of times we nod our heads and we're like, yeah, I know I can be honest with God, but do you really know that? Moses essentially looks at God and goes, God, this is frustrating. He blames the people. He's like, these people are acting like infants and you've dumped this on me and I don't know if I can do it and I'm angry and I feel like this burden is too great and I'm worried that I'm not going to be the kind of person who can carry it and I feel like I'm failing and I'm a little frustrated, just kidding, a lot frustrated, and I'm telling God all of this, and God doesn't go, how dare you, in a booming voice that we all expect, right? What does he do? He meets him in the midst of that moment, and God provides. He goes, Moses, go gather 70 people, and I'm going to put my spirit in them just like I put my spirit in you, and they're going to stand shoulder to shoulder with you because you can't carry this alone. You actually need people in your life who carry things with you. This is big. Friends, sometimes God's provision in your life isn't something. Sometimes it's someone. You know, I had a season in my life where I was having a really hard time. And as just working through some things around here as a leader and as a person, and I was struggling through a really difficult situation. I felt torn between trying to lead people, trying to love people. And you ever have one of those moments where you just know there's going to be pain on either side of this equation no matter what you choose? Like you're looking and you're going, there's not a good choice here. It's just like, which is the better of two bad choices and how do I walk through it? And it was just weighing on me. And I won't get into the personal details of that just to be honoring and kind to other people and things, but it was really heavy. I noticed during this season of time that I found myself going like, man, this will just be a patch of sand I'll get through, and then it turned into a desert. This will just be a quick moment that I work through, a season, and then it became a year. And you're just in it for a period of time. And I started losing sleep like we do when you're stressing out. And I noticed that there was inflammation in my body, which is often my body's way of being like, you're actually feeling this and this is actually real. And all these things were happening. I was really struggling and I felt kind of alone because I had this mentality, maybe you know what this is like when you're going through something in your own life. And I said, I know I need someone, but I don't want to put this on anybody. I don't want to become a burden to anybody, and I don't want anybody else to become a burden to me. I feel like I got enough to carry. And I have a really good friend who lives in Colorado that I've shared a lot of life with over the years. And I looked at the phone at one point and I was like, I should call him. And then I reached for my phone and I pulled it back. I was like, no, I'm not gonna do that. And then a week later, I should call him. And I reached for my phone and I pulled my hand back. I'm like, no, I'm not gonna do that. And it's because I knew that in his own life, he was going through some moments and some times. I knew that he had a desert of his own that he was journeying through. And I just thought, I don't wanna add weight to him. And what if he adds weight to me? So I just avoided him, a good friend, for a while. And at one point in time, it took like a month and a half, he finally calls me. And he'd been calling me, but I finally picked up. And he goes, hey, what's wrong with you? Where have you been? Did you disappear? Like, what's going on? And I just said, no, I'm sorry. And he goes, I've left you messages. And I said, I know. And then I just decided to be honest. I was like, I've been in a really bad space. I've been having a really hard time. And I wanted to talk about it, but I also know you're going through a thing too. And I didn't want to put that on you and your life. And I don't know. And he's like, well, I needed someone to talk to too. I didn't want to put that on your life, but I need a friend. And he goes, Ryan, you know, a friend's not a burden. A friend's somebody who comes alongside you and helps lift a burden. That's what a friend really is. And I was just like, yeah, I know that, but I didn't know it. Do you know what I mean? I knew that in my head, but I wasn't actively participating in that reality of my life. And he was like, can we just like stop trying to filter whether each other is okay, you know, to talk to or carry this? And can we just trust each other to be friends and help each other out? Because I've needed a friend too. And I said, yeah, I would love that. And so we talked. And man, that conversation, just one conversation, that conversation ended. And it felt like about 100 pounds had been lifted off my back. And it's not because my life changed. I was still going to step out of that moment, that conversation, into the same desert that I had been walking in. But now when I looked to my right, I had somebody with me. And I started to do this with other people where I look to my left and I have somebody with me and I realize that I'm not alone. That's a gift. You see, that was God's moment, I believe, in my own life where he didn't just provide something, he provided someone. Because sometimes when you're in the desert, the provision of God is someone for you. And so friends, I know that some of you are walking through something right now, and some of you are in the midst of a desert between where you were and this future that you believe God has for you, that you hope to be, and this is fatiguing and tiring, and you're burdened, and you're like, I can't do this alone, and maybe you can't. Maybe you shouldn't. So who's with you? When you look to your left, when you look to your right, who's with you? Is it a family member? Is it a friend? You know, as a church, this is why we care so much about connection, community, small groups. Yes, people sharpen one another. Yes, God grows us in ways with people that are often hard to get at ourselves. But also, do you know, you just need some people sometimes to be a shoulder next to you who has that Spirit of God in them that says, I see what you see, I care about what you care about, and I am for you in this moment. And they lift weight. Even though they don't carry it on their own backs, it just gets a little lighter for you. That's the beauty of connection and community. So maybe the question I asked shouldn't have been who's with you, but who will you invite to join you? I want you to think about your life right now. As you're walking through things, whatever desert you find yourself in, whatever burden you're carrying, who will you invite to join you? Is it a friend? Is it a family member? Is it someone from this community? Is it a small group? Is it a group of people you volunteer with? Who is it for you? I want you to pray about this. And the moment somebody comes to your mind with courage, just go let them know. And I know how hard it is. I stared at the phone for a month. But it's beautiful and it's good and it's worth the risk. And here's my promise. You're not a burden when you show up with a friend. It's a gift, friends. And so I hope you have that in your life. And I encourage you to invite somebody to it. And then let me end with this last thing. Here's the second piece this morning. I said I'd say two. If you want to enjoy the abundance of someday, right? When you get to that someday, that promised place that you hope you can live and thrive in, that you're dreaming about, if you want to enjoy the abundance of someday, then learn to find contentment in God's provision in the here and the now. This is really important. Look at Numbers 18. Keep reading here. God says, and say to the people, consecrate yourselves for tomorrow, and you shall eat meat. Okay, so this is about to happen in the desert. For you've wept in the hearing of the Lord, saying, who will give us meat to eat? For it was better for us in Egypt. Therefore, the Lord will give you meat, and you shall eat. And you shall not eat just 1 day, or 2 days, or 5 days, or 10 days, or 20 days, but a whole month until it comes out your nose, is literally what it says here. Yeah, you're like, this is really good. And then you're like, uh-oh, right? You're going to eat meat until it comes out your nostrils and becomes loathsome to you because you've rejected the Lord who's among you and have wept before him saying, why did we ever leave Egypt? Why did we ever come to this desert of our life in the first place? Why did we do this? And I know this is a weird way to end a message because a lot of times you'd end a message be like, isn't that an uplifting moment? And instead it's meat coming out your nostrils, which is a weird passage from the Bible. But it's important. There's something really, really important here. I wanted to close this section because for many of us, as we struggle to get to that someday that we're in because we're living life in the right now and we're struggling in the desert of our right now, we start to believe what the Israelites started to believe. We believe this lie that I can't live in right now because I just don't have blank. And if I just had blank, then right now would be someday. And we believe this. And we believe that if I just got it, if that just happened for me, then all this tension, all this struggle, all these things I'm dealing with right now, gone. They'd go away and we'd be okay. And do you know what God says? So there was an era of time where you guys were all really complaining that you didn't have any bread to eat. So do you know what I did? I caused manna to cover the ground every single day so that you had an endless supply of bread so that you always had exactly what you needed for life every single day. And now you're like, we hate bread. We just need meat. If we had meat, we'd have strength. You know what you're going to get? You're going to get quail. And God causes a migration of quail to come in, and it is so dense and so thick that they could fill truck beds with the stuff, you guys. It's like an abundance of meat, and the people eat their fill. And do you know why this happens? And God tells us right there, okay, I'm going to give you quail so that you can see that that's not the answer either. So that you can see that ultimately this isn't the thing that you really needed either. There's this fantasy of like, if I just had this, then. And I think we hold this just like the Israelites held this because we miss the point of what walking through the deserts of life is actually supposed to do for us. When we walk through the deserts of our lives, they form us. They shape us. They open us up on what it is to live as people with contentment in the little. And the reason why is because if you know what it is to live with contentment in the little, then when you have much, it won't destroy you. Then when you have much, you won't suddenly be overcome by it. It forms and forges who you are. I love this writer and podcaster, Marty Solomon. He speaks of the early Israelites in this same way. He says the desert was needed in the life of Israel because it took longer to get Egypt out of the Israelites than it did to get the Israelites out of Egypt. That entire time in the desert was God ultimately making and shaping them into the kind of people who could actually live in the promise when they got to the promised land. And the desert is a place of forging. Is it fun? No. Do I want to go there all the time? No. Am I wishing all of those moments? No. But don't miss what it does. The desert isn't an accident. The desert isn't an empty space between. The desert is a place of purpose where you take everything you can get from it and you learn what it is to be contented with little and to be a person who thrives in that moment so that when you land at the place that God is ultimately taking you, you know how to live there. Friends, we become the people who have life with God in the promised land by learning to walk with God in the deserts of our life. And I was talking with my wife. I shared this message with her yesterday because I'll run these things by her sometimes. And she said, Ryan, you need to make sure you tell people about where we are now. And I was like, what do you mean? Because I was just going to leave it out. And she said, no, I look back at that season of time. And she was like, we were so frustrated with each other. And she goes, but you know what I realize is because I couldn't be on the phone with you all the time, I was forging relationships with people that have become lifelong friends and that have built a kind of community and connection in me. And she goes, and because we were forced to only talk on Sundays, I feel like we got so good at working through how to talk through things and problems and moments. And when I hit that big fight in our first year of marriage, which actually happened, it wasn't a new experience of what to do. We took all of that stuff that got built up in us and we brought it to that moment and said, I want to see, let's talk our way through this and let's engage each other. Because it was a time of forging forward and becoming the people we need to be. And there was something about that whole season of time where so many pieces got built up in me, even though it was a struggle, even though it was a frustration, so that I could be a person who could be married to my wife and thrive in other aspects and areas of my life. You see, deserts have purpose and yours does too. So what would happen if you invited somebody to join you in it? What would happen if you invited somebody to be with you? And what would happen if you resisted the temptation to turn your life into complaint and ultimately to a spirit of discontentment with others, and instead you started your day with gratitude? You opened up your eyes and your heart to look at your real life and you're right here and you're right now, and you looked for the manna on the ground. What would happen if each day you started to cultivate that as you moved your way forward with people? Do you know what I believe will happen? Whatever someday God has for you, you're gonna walk your way into it being the person that God created you to be. And that means you'll be a people who can live in the promise of God and not just show up to a land that you don't know how to be in. And that's my hope and my prayer for all of us. Let's pray. God, we love you. I thank you for the journey that you have us on. I even thank you for deserts, even though if I'm honest, it's hard to sometimes. I thank you for the way that you forge things in us and you show us who you are and you mold us in ways that we aren't even aware of ourselves, God, and I just praise you for that. Lord, for people that are fatigued in this place, I pray that you breathe life into their spirit. For people that have been living in that space for a long time, I pray that you just give them a renewed sense of purpose. Open their eyes up to your provision in their life. Bring people around them to come shoulder to shoulder with them, God. And help us all as a church to love one another in a way that lifts a little bit of weight and encourages each other to go on. Lord, be beautiful in this world. Be beautiful in our lives. We hope in a promise, and we want to live in one as much as we can. We just praise you for all of it. In Jesus' name, amen. Guys, before you go, it's awesome to have you here. If you're new with us, again, I'm Ryan. I'm gonna be right over here in the next steps area and would love to meet you and just say thank you for coming. If any of this stirred something in you where you're saying, man, I'd love if someone would pray for me. We have wonderful people in the prayer room that I know would just love to do that with you, for you here this morning. And for all of you guys, thanks for making Fall Fest amazing and being a great church to host a community in. We'll see you soon.